Good evening. Okay, why don't we call meeting order? I'll start off with roll call.
Green, present.
King present.
Silmer present.
Townsend present. And note that the porter is absent. Okay. Start off, I'll give a brief summary of the CPRB. And basically, it was established as a tool to allow citizens to share complaints or concerns they had relating to treatment by our police officers. Currently, the board, the process is if there's a complaint, the complaint is on file. The police chief basically will look at all the information and he will make a decision as to whether treatment was fair or if there was an issue with unfair treatment. He writes his final report, and that report is submitted to the police review board. We look at it. Each of us have access to information, which we look at all the information, and then we as a board will basically come to a decision and write a written report, and that is submitted to the city council. The positive thing about the process is that it's a vehicle in which the public can feel assured that all efforts are being made for fair treatment and to look at issues from all sides. Having public individuals from the public involved in the process is a great asset to assure that a lot of people feel concerned about policing themselves. This is not the issue because of this board. The fact that we are citizens and we are involved in the process does bring a totally different element that assures that all issues and all sides are being looked at fairly. With that, I'd say, does any of the board members have anything they'd like to add to that?
I think that's a good summary.
Okay.
There are some details and information also in the pamphlets if you haven't received at the front. We'd encourage you to go ahead and review those.
Okay. Okay. I will remind you that this is a public forum, which is public recorded and being recorded for rebroadcast on City Channel 4. At this point, I would entertain a motion to accept correspondence or any documents that have been presented.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, there's none. It's been moved and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? The ayes have it. Okay. All right, now we're going to move down to introduction of our police chief. Chief Hadley, we'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? All right. This portion is just to kind of allow me to talk a little bit about the police department, some of our latest initiatives, kind of the state of the police department, if you will. You're lucky you're getting that before the city council does, but we have a councilman here, Susan Mims, and Mazahar Salih, so a couple council people here. And then we have some folks from the Human Rights Commission and other folks from various committees with the city. So welcome, everybody. I want to tell you about the structure of the police department itself. Some of you are familiar with it, some not so much. We have 82 sworn police officers, but we're swearing in 4 additional officers this Wednesday at 1 o'clock at City Hall. So if you're interested in watching that, we'll be doing it then this Wednesday. But that'll take us to 86. Now, 2 of those positions are grant positions, so those will be gone through attrition in the next couple of years because they're grant funded. But that's a fair amount of officers for a city of 74,000 folks. So I will tell you with that number, though, it keeps us very busy. We rely heavily on mutual aid through the University of Iowa Police Department to assist us, the Sheriff's Office and State Patrol, as well as surrounding agency. We have a very good working relationship with those agencies, And so we work as one, really. When we're busy, they come help us, and when they're busy, we go help them. So we can do more with a little less money, which is important to the taxpayers. For calls for service, we run 70,000 calls for service per year. Now, this year we were 700 calls for service, that is in 17, 700 calls for service fewer than we were in 2016. So when you're talking those kind of numbers, it was fairly much level. For crime, we only went up 1% in 2017 in overall crime, which is good. We don't like to see a big spike in crime. We love to see a reduction, but crime stats are somewhat like bell-bottom jeans. They fade in and out depending on what's going on with society and with reporting of those crimes. So when crime levels stayed level, we like that. We certainly like to see a reduction, but again, it's better than raising. What we did see an improvement in 2017 was a reduction in violent crime. If you look at just the FBI violent crime statistics, which is homicide, robbery, forcible assault, sexual assault, and then aggravated assaults, we only had a reduction of 4%. But if you throw in other sex crimes like forcible fondling and some of those, we actually had a reduction of 12% for violent crime. And we really like to see a reduction in those numbers. It's one thing for your car to get broken into, but it's another thing when your personal well-being is attacked. And so we certainly like to make sure that we're focusing on reduction in violent crime first, and then the property crimes as well. But that reduction in violent crime was big for us. Simultaneously, it's important for the police department to be fair in our enforcement and consistent in our enforcement when we are making the attempts to reduce crime. That is, we have to get rid of the crime race association and connection. We have to make sure that we're being fair and there aren't disparity and disproportionality in our traffic stops when it comes to contacts with minorities. And we have to make sure that we're administering procedural justice out there. That is, we're being fair on the stops, we're listening to folks, we're being patient, and being respectful and treating people, all people, with dignity, no matter what the circumstances. When we fail to do that, that's where folks like the CPRB can come in handy. They can take a look at our incidents, our processes, our contacts with citizens and community members, and help guide us through those murky waters. Our officers are human. They're not robots. They do make mistakes. But I will tell you, they're well-trained, and so their second nature is to rely on that training and be as professional as they can. And we expect them to do that, and we hold them accountable for that. And the CPRB holds us accountable for that as well. So it's very important to have that relationship and that level of transparency in everything that we do. For numbers for crimes, we have about, when we're looking at total crimes, and this doesn't count the alcohol possessions and things of that nature, but we have about 4,500 crimes per year that we deal with. So again, 70,000 calls for service. That is 70,000 times we're out responding to calls and stopping cars and maybe writing a parking ticket. But 4,500 of those are the actual thefts, robberies, criminal mischiefs, arsons, whatever crimes there are, 4,500. And again, 1% raise in that. So we stayed fairly level throughout the year. We do 12,000 traffic stops a year. It's a very high number. To give you sort of a barometer for that, the city of Davenport, which is much larger than us, does about 5,000 traffic stops per year. So we are very busy in stopping cars. I will tell you, my phone rings very often in Iowa City to report speeding vehicles, reckless vehicles, vehicles running stop signs. And I think it's because we have the university here, Kirkwood. We're pedestrian friendly. We encourage folks to be out on their bikes. And so we expect motorists to obey the laws and not hurt anybody. And that's why I believe, because of the high amount of non-vehicular traffic that we have, the pedestrians and bicyclists, that people do call that in. And so we're starting to focus heavily, and I will tell you the city council is focused heavily on traffic safety, be it through engineering issues to help slow drivers, or enforcement efforts, or technology We need to look at all of that to keep folks safe, and so we're working hand in hand with other departments in the city, between our traffic engineers, the street department, at the guidance of the city council to make sure that we're on top of that. It's very important for everybody. We're working very hard to reduce the disproportionality minority contact. A show of hands, how many did not know that we measure ourselves for DMC, disproportionality minority contact, that you had no idea we were even doing that? Okay, so it is well known, we've done it for 15, 20 years, but most recently in the 2010 through now, through 2018, we look at that annually. We look at the numbers on disproportionality. Are there disparities? The answer is yes. Do we have work to do? The answer is yes. But we strive to work very hard to keep that reduction going. And not just the amount of traffic stops, but the outcomes of the stops too. When we stop folks, are we asking more blacks to search their car than we are whites? Are we writing more tickets to blacks than we are whites? Are we arresting more blacks than we are whites? And those measurements are also counted as well. Once I stop that car, I call that low-hanging fruit. We need to be extremely fair and consistent. I may not know what color a person is when I stop the car, and if you've ever done a ride-along with this, or even without doing a ride-along, at night when you're following a car, try to figure out the race of the person driving, the skin color of the person driving is not easy to do. But by and large, just pure numbers, that should be a 1-to-1 ratio, correct? It should be no disparity, no disproportionality. And we haven't gotten there yet, but it's even easier for us to measure and control when we stop somebody to say, don't write somebody of color more than you would a white person. That's a pretty easy decision. And whether it's an implicit bias thing, or the officer thinks that they're gonna find more, that's an uneducated move on our part for that to happen. And we need to make sure that our officers are well-trained and well-educated to know that if you stop a person for their taillight, and they're a person of color, and you search their car more than you do a white person's, you're not gonna find any more contraband than you do the white person. The stats are real clear, so stop doing it. We've sent that message very strong to our officers, and we're gonna see improvements in that area. So it's important for us to while we're dealing with disproportionality in the name of fairness, that we concentrate on education and training for the officers. And I'll tell you how important that is. We've gone from 200 hours total training in 2016 to over 1,100 hours in 2017 in that area since I've been here. And I got here in January of 17. So I put a lot of emphasis on that, and we will continue to do that. Then the second thing is our deployment of resources. We're not deploying resources and trying to reduce crime by targeting certain communities or communities of color. We need to target crime trends and address the problem where it stands to reduce especially violent crime, as I mentioned. And the other thing that we're doing too is to improve our community outreach. Community policing is one of the pillars of the 21st century policing that President Obama had put into place. And that means getting out and earning the trust and the legitimacy of the community to let them know that, as Sir Robert Peel said, the public is the police and the police are the public. And so we need to make sure that folks appreciate what we do, understand what we do, respect what we do, and trust that we're doing the right thing. And so continual contact with the public in formal settings like our Citizens Police Academy and National Night Out and the Hate Crimes Public Forum we just did, and then informal as well. Again, that procedural justice. Every time we come into contact with folks, whether we're meeting them in the Ped Mall or we're on a traffic stop with them, that they're treated with dignity and respect. So those are the things that we're working on for the disproportionality portion. With that, let me introduce Colin Fowler. So Officer Fowler is our I say new, he's not really new, it's been several months now, but downtown police officer. So David Schwint was the officer before him. A lot of folks called him Officer Friendly, but he works quite often with Angela from the downtown district. and some of the downtown businesses to improve quality of life downtown, quality of the business community downtown. And the idea is to enhance everybody's experience down here. I mentioned 70,000 calls for service. The downtown district is our #1 calls for service. 12,000 calls for service each year for the downtown district. So compared to the second district is like 5,000 in certain neighborhoods. So that tells you how busy we are down here. When you're talking numbers that big, we need to focus on that because there's a lot of activity down here between residences, the university, the businesses, everything that's going on. So very important. So I'm going to give him the floor here just a minute to talk a little bit about what he does and what some of his goals are.
Thank you. I'm Colin Fowler. I took over the liaison spot late last year from Officer Schwint. He's moved on to the Data-Driven Justice Project, so he's still around, just not seen very often. Before I took over his position, I worked in the downtown on bike patrol for about 5 years, so you may have seen me down there. I often get recognized. So when I took over for his position, I already had a good understanding of the issues that were downtown, the people that were down there, the transients, the students, and a lot of the business owners. So one of the fun and challenging parts of my job is I try and make the downtown, specifically the north side, the Ped Mall area, all those different groups of people trying to use the same footprint, everyone trying to get their own enjoyment out of it. So it's challenging and it's fun. In the winter, a lot of my job shifts to homeless outreach. The homeless that we see downtown during the warm months suddenly have to get inside at night. Otherwise it's dangerous, so I get to work with the homeless an awful lot. I inherited Officer Schwint's nickname is the Sock Police. So I have a massive drawer full of warm socks and hats and scarves that I carry around with me when I'm on patrol and I give them out, which gets me some teasing from my coworkers, but I can take it, it's not too bad. It's really rewarding though, and also since I work with the homeless so much, I'm involved in the new Housing First project that's gonna go up in Cross Park. I think I recognize people from groundbreaking there, but that's really exciting to me, and since I've known the homeless for so long, hopefully the people that are most at risk and need housing the most get to the top of the list. If you have any questions, I'm always downtown. I usually have the bright yellow shirt, I look like a walking highlighter. And I also have a city-issued cell phone if you have any questions too.
Let me add one thing to that too. One of the positions that I talked about that we're adding is going to be a downtown officer in the evening hours, because he takes off around 5 or 6 at night, as Schwint did. And talking to the nighttime mayor, Angela, and Nancy from the downtown district, and some of the businesses and my officers, we really need a downtown officer during those evening hours. So the city council supported us in hiring somebody to do that, and also spend half their time out into the neighborhoods too. One of the problems with the neighborhood response unit for Loud Party Patrol, they call it, is a timely response. So this officer would double as that as well. If there's loud party calls going in the neighborhood areas, which generally circle right around the downtown area for the most part, then he or she will be available for a quick response and not delayed. As we talk to some of our neighborhood folks in the neighborhood support division of the city, they said that's one of the biggest problems is delayed response to those calls. So we want to enhance that. So this person will be working hand in hand with Angela, identifying issues and identifying ways that we can improve the quality of the experience of the downtown area. We're excited about that position. You should see that right around July. That's when we'll get that going. So I just wanted to add that. That's all we have.
Well, I had a question. The substation we have that was created, what's your feelings about that? Do you feel it's getting the results that we wanted?
Yes, and thank you, because I was supposed to bring that up and I forgot. He's keeping me going. How many in here did not know that we had a substation in the southeast side, over by where Kmart was located? Okay. It's in that plaza near, is it Stuff et cetera, in that area right off Highway 6, behind Taco Bell and stuff. So the substation has been in existence for 2 or 3 years now, and we're using it more than we ever have. We've assigned Henry Harper, our community outreach assistant, who's a civilian position, but wears a uniform, drives one of the white pickup trucks that has markings on it. And he works hand in hand with the schools. He works hand in hand with community members, does a lot of public outreach, the formal programs we talked about. And he is actually housed down there now because we wanted more presence down there. We also have a couple of our outreach police officers working out of there too. Officer Cash is out of there part-time and Officer Hayes is out of there full-time. Now, they're always out doing their duties as well, but that's their home base. We're going to continue to enhance use of that. As a matter of fact, for National Night Out this year, which is the first Tuesday in August, we actually want to open the doors of the substation, have some refreshments, and make that a focal point for National Night Out. I was there for a Crime Stoppers meeting the other day, and a gal needed assistance off to the east of us, and she ran over there for assistance, knowing that she could get help there. So important that people feel that there's a place closer to them than having to come down here to deal with an issue. So we like that spot. We think it's important. I will tell you, I would love to see a substation on the west side to serve some folks over in the Mormon Trek area. You know, these come at a cost, obviously. You know, I haven't approached city council yet. But we will certainly, we will certainly keep, I have talked to some landlords over there, and it's not impossible to do. So, but these can be very successful. We put a TV in the substation because every night between about 4:30 and 6 o'clock, there's kids that come and hang out with some of the officers in Henry, watch TV, and just get to know them. So that's the kind of environment that we want to create, that sense of, you know, fostering relationships with our youth and with the neighborhoods. And I think something on the west side would be equally as important. So thanks for bringing that up, Orville. And those substations are great, and we want to continue to enhance that experience.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Okay, next we have public discussion and community input. An opportunity for you to come and share your concerns and speak. We would ask that when you do come up, that first of all you sign in, that you speak into the mic, and that you state your name for public record and recording. So at this point, the microphone is open.
Good evening. I want to first thank you all, being community volunteers, volunteering your time and being on the Police Review Board. It's a pleasure having committed citizens like this, and I do appreciate that.
Harry, will you state your name?
You just did. I'm Harry Olmstead. I have a couple of concerns that I want to mention. One of the things that's starting to happen in our community, and I kind of believe it's more student, if anybody, is cars blocking the, what we call the curb ramps, those ramps that come off the sidewalk. And I ran into one this afternoon that was totally blocked, so I had to go out on the street to get around it. I did report it. But the problem is it's only across the crosswalk, so the fine is only $25. The curb cuts are required by ADA, and we are working on compliance with that. But I'd like to see, and I'm going to be directing a letter to the city council, that we raise the rate for those that are blocking curb cuts, so that it really has impact. $25, I don't think it's going to have much impact, and I think we need to let people know how important these are, because if it was at night and with the poor light in this area, someone certainly gets hit, killed, whatever. So I would hope that you would join me in directing a correspondence to City Council, asking them to consider raising the rate. The second issue that I want to address deals with safety, not only in our schools, but in our community. We're seeing violence happening in communities throughout the United States. Today, there was one in Canada with a van that mowed over 10 people, I think 6 were killed. I want to know what is being done to prevent having these type of violent acts occurring in our schools and in our community. Chief?
Sure. Well, let's talk about the school first. We're on a couple of different committees with the Iowa City Community School District to address school violence. One of them is more reactive in nature. That is, if something were to go down, what can they do about it? And so, just as recently as Saturday, where we had we taught ALICE training. That is the training to either run, fight, or hide if an incident were to happen. And not just to the schools, but also invited the parents and students voluntarily. We don't like to teach it right to the students. That can send the wrong message. It's really the school's job to direct their students, but we do train the faculty and staff of the school district itself. And when I say that, countywide, the whole school district has been trained in that. And so they keep their thumbs on that, and we give them reassurance that if it were to happen, their second nature will kick in. They'll know what to do to reduce the chance of more deaths or more injuries. Also, looking at the school buildings themselves, we have officers that are certified in crime prevention by environmental design. I don't know if you're involved in that or not at all, but we've got a few officers that are trained in that. And that's to look at the structure itself and make a determination of how we can make it safer. As simple as numbering the doors, so when an event happens, we don't say, well, we're on the south side, or a teacher at the south side. Well, what is the south side? What, door 6, door 9, door 10? You know, so it's clearly labeled. We all know which one we're talking about. And then also the systems inside the school, be it security, video, or whatever. Certainly have talked to them about best cases for using those. So those systems are in place as well. Anytime that the school has a problem with a student that they can't quite handle themselves, it's repetitive, it appears it could get violent, they don't hesitate to contact us. We respond and assist them with that. Our goal is not to put students in prison. It's not to to have the school to prison pipeline, if you will, is to keep everybody safe and get that student help. And so we can sometimes do referrals, and the school does a great job with their counselors and their system as well. But we can help them with that too, to keep everybody safe. So those lines of communication are open, and we do the best we can with that. As far as the community itself, again, we focus on violent crime. The Pedmal shooting is a prime example. That's something where, when that situation occurred, a lot of the names involved weren't new to us. We were familiar with it. Unfortunately, things unfolded downtown where you couldn't have picked a worse night or a worse area for that to happen if it were to happen. But the success there is we had a very quick response. We made arrests that night, and those folks have been convicted and they're in prison that were held responsible. It's unfortunate that there were victims involved as well. So we have increased our intelligence database and try to make sure that we, if people are out doing those violent crimes we talked about, the aggravated assaults, the robberies, the murders, we need to know who those folks are, and we need to do something about it. And we're enhancing those databases the best we can. And we do that so we don't have to do a shotgun effect. That is, stop everything moving and try to figure out who's doing something. So communication, sharing of information, including with our federal and state partners and area agencies, is so important. That takes the whodunit out of it, and it lets us focus on reducing crime through contact with those folks.
And I have one more quick question. We know the city council has approved the redevelopment of the Ped Mall, but one of the problems on the Ped Mall that I've noticed over the last several years is vehicles parking on the Ped Mall. On Saturday, there was a glass cleaning company that parked right on the side of the library, and it was there 3-4 hours. I hope there could be something done, because obviously, the way those vehicles is what's also taking its toll on the Ped Mall. And with new Ped Mall coming, we certainly don't want to damage that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the goals for the new Ped Mall, is to have that infrastructure a little stronger and updated, so it can withstand the rigors of today's, activities and vehicles versus before. As far as the vehicles on the Ped Mall itself, unfortunately, sometimes it's necessary for maintenance and upkeep, because you have to have the vehicle or lifts or equipment to get the job done. It's kind of like when a large semi-truck blocks Clinton Street when they're doing loading and unloading to get freight in. So these businesses in a pedestrian-only area won't survive if we don't allow some vehicle access and goods to get to their stores in an efficient, safe way. It is up to the stores themselves, the businesses themselves, to make sure that they're doing it as quickly as they can and as safely as they can. So we see problems in that area, we can certainly address those, but it does come with the fact of having a pedestrian mall. You're going to have the two pedestrians and vehicles intermix occasionally.
Thank you very much, and we do appreciate our chief. He's anniversary of 1 year, I believe, and we look forward to him continuing.
Thank you.
I have more questions, but I'll let somebody else have the floor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harry.
I'm Joe Coulter. I'm with the Human Rights Commission here in Iowa City. I'm also with the University of Iowa College of Public Health, College of Medicine. As you know, we're potentially facing an opioid epidemic here. It's not gotten as bad as it has, say, in Ohio and some other places, but the city, and it very much involves the police department as well as other community functions, as well as the county, about where are we with regard to naloxone training and access to naloxone to deal with the emergency situations, and what are the board as well as the chief's perspectives on the progress or lack thereof that we're making on the access center, and what roles do you see the police, and especially you, because one of the populations are the homeless, as well as other groups, including the elderly, and the contamination, if you will, with fentanyl, and where is that coming from, and how is that getting into the medications. So there's a lot to talk about there, and I'd like to just ask the board if they've begun to kind of open up a little bit to see what their role as the review board might be in terms of this expanded functions of the police department as well as other aspects of the community.
So you got a couple of questions there. Let's talk about the opiates and the fentanyl issue and narcotics issues in our city. Matter of fact, it'll help if I just throw a couple stats at you, just to give you an understanding of where those drug cases set. So, drug violations last year, we had 367 drug cases last year. In the year before, that is 2016, 424. So we had a big reduction in the amount of drug cases, which is always a good thing. Equipment violations, which is paraphernalia, things of that nature, also went down from 174 in 2016 to 151 in 2017. We are members of the Johnson County Drug Task Force, and we have grant money in place to assist us in offsetting those costs. And so we work with the state departments of narcotic enforcement. We work with all the other agencies that have somebody assigned to the Drug Task Force. That means we put a lot of efforts into combating illicit drug use in our community. And the opiates are absolutely at the top of that list. Our most frequent thing is still methamphetamines. Those are the things that we still struggle with. Labs have dropped down since we have put places or mechanisms in place. I say we, the state law, to reduce the ability to buy the over-the-counter drugs that's used to make methamphetamine, so that's helped. So now 80–90% of it's being imported in from Mexico and other states. So that being said, that's helped reduce making it, but it still exists and still causes a problem. When we do run across somebody that has overdosed on an opiate, painkillers, if you will, heroin, whatever the case is, Johnson County Ambulance carries Narcan, the drug that counteracts that overdose and has a immediate assistance for that person. They're generally, we just did a study on this last year when I got here, the fire chief and I did at the request of the city council. And their response is quicker than ours. When it comes to the medicals, they're usually getting that initial trip, and so they're getting there faster. At that,
Officers have?
well, we don't, and at that time, we evaluated whether we should carry it or not, along with the fire department, who also doesn't carry it. And it was decided, but these things have a shelf life, and our concern was if we buy this stuff and it sits, not being used, it doesn't do anybody any good. Johnson County Ambulance is just getting on faster than we are able to take care of that. Everything's a balance, so if we start to see that they're not getting there faster, that we could be on top of it faster and administer it, the stuff's easy to use. So that wouldn't be a problem. But we want to make sure that we're carrying the right things at the right time for the right reasons, and it's going to be effective. Right now, that balance hasn't happened. But I will tell you, I've talked to the mayor personally about this, and it's one of his big concerns is that when that balance needs to happen, we will certainly trigger that. Starting with the fire department, the fire chief said, you know, Chief, we should carry it before you do. When we need to have it, we'll have it. And then the police officers themselves. So it's a good question. Fentanyl is a whole other issue. It's a very powerful drug. It is interlaced with some of the drugs that we're seeing. We have had a couple cases of it on eastern Iowa, not in the city here, but in the eastern Iowa area. When somebody gets hold of that, it has deadly effects because it's so powerful. And we have put precautions in place for our police officers so we don't get inadvertently exposed to it when we're dealing with drug cases. And that's very important to keep us safe as well. You know, when they're coming across it, we're sharing that instantly and figuring out, you know, where it is and you know, if it's starting to creep into the area. Right now, we've been pretty lucky. Same with opiate deaths, you know, a few have occurred, but it's not the big spike that you're seeing in some of the other cities to the east and also some of the other states to the east, Ohio and further east. It is out of control in those areas. We have a lot of it here, but it's not blown the lid off like some states, and so we continue to monitor that as well.
I think it's very important is the expense of incarcerating individuals or sending them to the emergency room, to the ER, is much greater than what we would have to spend for an access center to keep people out of jail and to give them the kind of treatment to address their problems. Where does the board and
Well,
police department stand on
I can't really speak to that as a member of the Community Police Review Board. I don't really know if that's within our charter or purview, but in my other life as a Crisis Center board member, I do support the Access Center. So I'm glad that they're, trying to have interventions before it goes to, incarceration or, emergency rooms. I think it's important to have those interventions in place. But in terms of the police board, I don't know if I can necessarily speak to that in this regard.
I'd second Ms. Green's statement there, and my previous experience before this too also allowed me to participate in drug court, which I thought was very valuable downtown as well, and I wish we'd incorporate more of those. But as far as our review board role, we're not in charge of overseeing the entire police procedures or policies, where oversight is limited just to the occasions where there's a complaint made, and then even in that case, it's just narrowly on those specific facts.
Yes, I could imagine a complaint saying, well, how come I didn't get sent to the Access Center and they arrested me and threw me in jail?
But you have to say, basically, probably the only way that we would get involved in that is, what you're talking about is something that if we get overwhelmed with it, our officers are human. And if they do make a mistake, and it could be because of training, then our responsibility would be, as we look at the information, to try to point that out and make recommendations to the city council to put things in place to adequately address that need.
So, look, I'm gonna have Officer Fowler talk a little bit about our crisis intervention techniques that we use, and that segues into the Access Center. I'll summarily tell you that we are all for an Access Center. We're all for jail alternatives. If you talk to Lonnie Prokrovic, and I have lunch with him all the time, his jail is full of folks that shouldn't be there. And so we want to do everything we can to divert that. So we hear you loud and clear. I think our city council and our county supervisors and everybody that I've talked to is on the same page with that, because it's the right thing to do. And really, I don't want to say you could use less of us at that point. We're going to stay busy doing other things. But we should be doing things to reduce the crime that matters and get these other folks help that need it. So he's one of our instructors for crisis intervention.
Yeah, so, are you guys familiar with CIT? Have you heard of it before? Anybody? No? There's a short version, a long version. I'll give the medium version then. So CIT started, I believe, down south, maybe Tennessee, or Nashville, I can't remember one of those cities, but I was lucky enough to go to
Memphis.
Memphis, thank you, I never did it. Tennessee's in my brain today. I went to the 40-hour instructor training in San Antonio. And San Antonio right now is regarded as one of the leaders in CIT. So that was a fantastic training there, and I also got to go to some of the training in St. Louis. The whole idea about that is trying to have officers, like you both are speaking about, find alternatives other than jail, especially when someone's, the behavior that we're being called for as a result of mental health or chemical instead of deliberate defiance or deliberate criminality. So part of the 40-hour training that we do here in this county for all the officers is to give them a body of knowledge about mental health and training on how to recognize the behaviors that are being called for, and using something besides jail, maybe the hospital or the Access Center that comes online, as an alternative. We're all aware that, or at least I am, the FUSE study and how expensive high utilizers can be when they get into that rut of jail, ER, ambulance, court, all that, and how expensive it is. So a byproduct of CIT is that if you use these other alternatives to that system, you get a better outcome for the client and a better outcome for the community at a lower cost. So we're only 2 40-hour sessions away from having every officer in Johnson County. That's every municipal PD, every sheriff's deputy, all those folks, only 2 more 40-hour classes away from having them all trained in that. The police academy has started training it now. So once we get everybody trained that hasn't been in the police academy in a while, every officer that's going to be in Johnson County is going to have that training under their belt.
Some municipalities and jurisdictions just choose to have a CIT team that, okay, I'm an officer, I'm not trained, but I'll call an officer who is. We've chosen to train everybody. We want immediate response, we want knowledge, and again, supported by the city council, who's actually been hands-on with this and went down to, some of them went down to San Antonio and actually participated in that in that training. So there's a lot of buy-in. We're on the same page. It's an excellent question, and we hope to see, not hope, we will see some results in that. There's money involved. It's gonna take time. But until then, at least we're trained up and we can start doing the right thing early on. And hopefully the facilities and the actual infrastructure follows eventually. Great question.
Hi, my name is Megan Alter, and I'm just a community member. I also volunteer with a group that is called the Black Voices Project. And one of the areas that the groups are concerned with is actually reestablishing or furthering trust between authorities, specifically the police, and youth of color. So that's kind of the background with which I'm coming to this question. I also attended the Hate Crimes Forum not too long ago. And during the discussion afterwards, some community members talked about the fact that on the one hand, if you see something, say something tends to be the sort of rule of thumb. However, there are many community members who have been victimized who, because the trust is not there, do not feel willing to come forward to talk about their trauma. And so I was wondering, in light of some of the literature that I was looking at earlier about formal complaints that come to the board, is there a mechanism in place, and it's a tough question, I recognize, is there a mechanism in place through the police department or other law enforcement agencies to collect data on informal complaints, things that are not actually making it to the board or not making it onto paper, but really are sort of things that perhaps police officers who are in the neighborhoods are hearing about a colleague that the neighborhood is talking about? Or are there ways in which you can collect that informal, more anecdotal, but oftentimes extremely important preventative data so that it ends up that a problem is perhaps addressed before it reaches the board?
So, yeah, the formal complaints are fairly easy to track because those are documented. We try to make it as easy as we can for folks to bring improper conduct or alleged wrongdoings on our officers' part to our attention. We recently, through using a racial equity toolkit project last year, started a system online, so someone can just jump online and you can commend an officer, but you can also complain about an officer. And so that way it's a click of a button and you don't have to physically come in and, like you said, sometimes the police department's the last place somebody wants to be, but you can still lodge the complaint online. You can do it by phone. However you can get that, you could write us a letter. However you can get that information to us, we want to make it as easy as possible and less intrusive. I can't get people to apply for jobs because if they can't do it online, they don't want to do it. So we know where technology lies, and so we've tried to match those two together. We have policies in place for officers. If they get in passing in a neighborhood saying, I don't know about that Jody Matherly guy, you need to watch him, and there's something going on with him, and they get any information that, alleges that I might be doing something wrong, they have to report that to us, the officer does. It's not anecdotal at all, it's not just in passing. And so we also have a early warning systems policy in place. If our own officers are spotting a problem with an officer, they're acting a little out of character, they see something that shouldn't have happened, they are forced by rule to report that as well. So we're, by rule, have to police each other, and we have to report, issues that are going on, even if it's just in passing with the community, and that allows us to vet the officer. Now, I've been doing this 35 years. I will tell you that police officers don't like to work with other police officers who aren't doing their job, who are dishonest, or who are abusive. They don't like it. They didn't get into this business to be that way. They didn't get into to be hated. They didn't get into this job to be disliked. They did it to help the community. They certainly didn't do it for pay. We don't get rich, but it is a good living. But they did it because they want to be community oriented and they want to help people, period. And so You know, people talk about the thin blue line and how officers, you know, will fail to report issues with other officers. And I will tell you, and I've worked for many agencies in many capacities, that couldn't be farther from the truth. As a chief, I don't let those folks work for me, and officers do not want their peers to be that. And they will be the first one, and even our union, our police union will say, we'll be the first one to say if the person shouldn't be a cop, we don't want them to be a cop. So I will assure you that this agency is very well versed. We have good policy in place and good communication with our community to weed those folks out. We've got great people. People make mistakes. If it's a mistake of the head, I can correct that, but if it's a mistake of the heart, they gotta find another place to work.
Any other questions? Okay, Walter.
I'll make a statement real quick, sorry. That's not a complaint or a question. I'm Angela Winnicky with the Downtown District, and I also manage a business downtown during the day. So I have a twofold statement that I want to make, because I think you probably only hear complaints or negative feedback, and I, as a representative of the downtown businesses at night, I would say the feedback in the last 6 to 8 months, as I've been in this position as nighttime mayor, has been extremely positive. Not everything, and it's not a perfect relationship between the police department and our nighttime businesses, but the perception of the relationship that I think Chief Matherly and the nighttime officers have tried to develop with the downtown businesses has improved significantly, which I think is really important. Even in the last few weekends, as the weather's gotten nicer and I'm out and about talking to various bar owners, bar managers, restaurant owners, the feedback is that they feel like the police are trying to be more a part of the downtown community rather than just enforcing, which I think is what the police department is trying to do. And then as a daytime business manager down here, we developed a really great relationship with Officer Schwint and now with Officer Fowler. And it is such a positive relationship that I'm really excited for this evening nighttime officer position to be created. Officer Fowler creates a sense of security downtown with a lot of the daytime businesses that they know that he'll respond immediately if they have a question or a concern. And we talk about this downtown amongst the businesses, and I think just as a person enjoying downtown, when Officer Fowler is off doing training or isn't around downtown, it's a noticeable difference in the pet mall, I think, for how safe people feel and how easily they think, you know, an issue can be addressed. So we're really excited to have the evening officer position. The nighttime businesses really appreciate this sense of working with the police department instead of being enforced, you know, having certain things enforced within their businesses. So it's been an extremely positive feedback, which is great for everyone, I think. So just wanted to make that statement.
Thank you. And while you're standing there, Angela, this nighttime mayor's position isn't something that we came up with. We actually, I say we, the city and the downtown district, modeled this after similar programs elsewhere. But what a great idea to have a liaison that's eyes and ears and feet on the ground, especially during those evening hours, and have a voice and a good liaison and connection for the police department and with bars themselves and business owners themselves and each other. So it's very valuable. And I think you're going to see with a nighttime officer down here, you're going to see her position and this additional position with the police department. It's going to flourish, and I think you're going to find that it's going to be very valuable as a team. So we're looking forward to that too.
One other thing, one of the great things that Chief Matherly was a part of was working with the UI DPS and the Shout program. And I just have to speak to it because this past weekend, I had a grad student job shadow me from the harm reduction program at the University of Iowa. And speaking to students just out in the streets and asking for their feedback about what they thought of Shout. And it all goes to this helping people instead of jailing people idea and concept, even amongst the students, has made a significantly positive impact, I think, on their perception between the police department and the university DPS from what it used to be even a year ago. And For those of you who don't know what the SHOUT program is, Students Helping Out. And it is kind of owned and driven by the University of Iowa with kind of help and implementation with the Iowa City Police Department, the downtown district. And it is a layer of help and protection for those who are downtown and on campus. Before businesses or those who feel unsafe call the police department, they can call SHOUT, and they can get like a ride home or someone to walk them home if they feel unsafe leaving the library. And even if it's like a Friday night and you're intoxicated and you're a community member, you get separated from your friends and you don't have a safe way of finding your way home or don't know how to, SHOUT can help you instead of a police officer having to take you to jail. So it's a great program for our entire community.
And kudos to Director Scott Beckner at the university for getting that up and running. And he's got a model that says, if we're gonna fight crime, let's take the victims out of the mix. And so these students are there to say, hey, you know, you're walking alone, I got separated from my group, let us help you. Let's take that victim out of the mix. And it's so important. It also is a tool for the business owners to say, I got a person that probably shouldn't be here. Well, you know, the back half of our car, unfortunately, is not a taxi, and the front side is the police car. And so this gives us a tool, and the officers absolutely love it because it gives them an alternative, a diversion program to get that person home safely, and then they can go out and do their job. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, and I think you're gonna see a lot of innovative programs like that. Beckner's pretty good at that stuff, and married with our department in downtown, what a great program, so, yeah.
Thanks, Angela.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, does any board members have anything they'd like to share? Chris, Terry, staff, you guys have anything you'd like to share? Okay, well, just kind of in closing, I would just like to say that we think about police force in terms of they, them, you know, and basically where it's really at is they're all about to protect and serve. But I think basically as a community and as a group, we can contribute to that simply by thinking in terms of we, and things that we can do to help and to get involved. Our city, this is our city. We have a beautiful city, but we also have a responsibility to make it better. So if there are no other input, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion.
Okay.
A second.
Moving second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned, and thank you for coming.